Welcome back to the channel, guys. Today we're going to look at this. This is a 2018 NC750X. Previously, I had two NC700Xs, so how does this one compare to the old ones? So let's start up here. This is a very interesting bike, and it uses 17-inch wheels, so it's a really good handling bike in the corners. It's got a massive rotor, and it's a single-sided rotor. Usually on a 700cc bike, you'll get two rotors up front, but no, this is one single rotor. That means that the brake caliper only has two pads on it, so less maintenance, which is good. And it's a Nissan brake caliper. The styling is very much like the NC700, and it's styled after an ADV rider market. The commuters nowadays have all essentially become adventure bikes. It's up in horsepower from the NC700, 54 horsepower at 6,200 RPMs. Torque, 50 pounds of torque, 6 inches of travel in the front, and in the rear it has 5.9 inches. It weighs about 493 pounds for the DCT model, but this one weighs 472 pounds. So why get this over the NC700X? Well, this is definitely the more updated version. It gets slightly better gas mileage, which is hard to believe because the old one got really great one as well. It's a 6-speed transmission. The other was also 6-speed, but it's essentially the same. And honestly, if you want an NC700 to save fuel costs, the 700 is actually a better buy. These 750s tend to be much more expensive because they are an improvement. But, you know, for me, I will get an CRF 250L Rally over the 300 just to save costs. Now, this engine is a twin-cylinder, efficient twin-cylinder. I think the reason you would want one of these as opposed to like a CB500X is of this engine. It's a lazy engine that almost feels like it's a diesel. It's not a typical motorcycle engine. So if you think you're going to get something that's really fun to ride, kind of like a standard CB500 or whatever, this is not it. This is more of a scooter engine. If you look at the orientation of the engine, it's very different than the standard upright position. The engine emphasizes low-end torque, so it makes it easier to handle at lower speeds and provides a more relaxed riding experience. The torque and power is available right from the start as opposed to revving up this engine like a standard engine. So it makes riding, even for a beginner, extremely easy. Because of the cylinder configuration and forward-leaning engine, it basically helps a lot of the weight of the bike. It's centered much lower. It doesn't weigh very much. It's 490 something pounds for this bike, but the weight is more centrally distributed than a typical motorcycle. Power output of this is about 54 horsepower, and it's up about 4 horsepower since the 700cc version. Because of this engine, it's also one of the most fuel-efficient motorcycles available. This particular model is extremely popular in Europe, where gas costs about $6 to $7 per gallon. You could also get this bike in the DCT version. I had the 700cc version with the DCT, and I also had a manual version of the 700. I prefer the manual just because you have a little bit less weight and it's slightly narrower at the engine. When it comes to durability, these bikes have seen hundreds of thousands of miles. If you intend on keeping a motorcycle for a long time, I really recommend looking at the 700 and the 750 of this. It's low revving, so the durability is going to last, and the engine weight is very low. Everything about it is very low to the ground. It's an easy bike to live with just because if you are a home mechanic, you could also work on this particular bike yourself. You don't have to take it into a shop. So the type of rider that would get this is somebody that would be more into like a V-Strom 650 or a KLR 650. This is more of an utility bike, but it's one of the best commuters around just because it gets such good mileage. Imagine like riding this thing cross country. You're getting 70, 80 miles to the gallon. I've seen riders claiming 90 miles to the gallon on this thing. It's comfortable, it's slim, it's easy to live with, it doesn't take up a lot of space. Now, it's not perfect. That would be nice if Honda decided to put a shaft drive on this. C stands for new concept. And this is one of the things that Honda's kind of just skipped out on the cost. I know that they put a chain because it is more efficient, but at the same time, if you're going to build something with a new concept in mind, you might want to consider a shaft drive or a belt drive. I think that would really bring in a little bit more of the uniqueness about this bike. It seems like they spent a lot of the development and engineering in the front and left the transmission kind of empty. If you look at the BMW CS, you can see that BMW actually went a little bit further than the NC. This particular one's got a really nice aftermarket foot peg with the angle adjuster. So very nice. And it does have rubberized pegs with the teeth on the side if you want it to ride off-road. And you can adjust it. So that's a nice feature. Shifter. Behind this plastic cover sits a sprocket. So you just have a bolt here, a bolt down here. You would have to remove the shifter to remove the counter sprocket. You have foot pegs for your passenger. These are pretty standard. Radiator is fully exposed, so it's easy to reach, but also at the same time, this radiator can be pulled to the front so you can reach the front or the top of the engine. You do have a conventional fork, and I have to say that the suspension on this bike is not very good. It's extremely harsh, and you would think that with budget suspension like this, that you would get softer, plusher ride, but every ripple on the road, you can kind of feel it, which kind of defeats the purpose of having a conventional fork and budget suspension. Generally, it tends to be much softer. A nice thing that Honda decided to do, they gave us a 90-degree valve on the wheels, making you fill this thing much easier. This tack is definitely different than the NC700, much more updated, and let me take you through it. It's pretty interesting, but it only has 2 buttons. When you have the key off, it still has the time on there. So turn it on, light goes on in the headlight, nice graphics. It's interesting that you do have the ability of changing the color on the NC750X. If you go through here, you push it, you have the total. This bike has got 5,500 miles. Trip A. You also have the onboard computer, miles per gallon. You have miles per gallon average, and then here's the average. And it also has the instant calculation. I don't know how accurate it is, but this bike is meant for getting really good fuel efficiency. That's why it's important. And up here, you have a tachometer. This is your reset. Here you have your fuel gauge. I'm down to 2 bars. You have your clock. Pretty simple setup. And then you have a bunch of indicator lights here that will come on. So right now it's got the oil light, which means I just haven't started it. And then the neutral. Hold the select. And then you can change the color. You can go into the gear or the rev mode, which changes the color. It also has this. It's like a little hat that shades the gauge cluster also a little bit more. This is a pretty typical setup. Kill switch and then the start. On the left handlebar, you have the high beam. These headlights are LEDs, which is really nice. Then you have a emergency hazards button. You have a horn. This one's an aftermarket horn, which is nice. And then you have a turn signal button in the wrong spot. So Honda's been doing this, reversing the turn signal with the horn for quite some time. Mirrors are really good. You see directly behind you, and of course this one's got little blind spot mirrors. The main point of having a forward-facing engine is that you basically get a space here. This is the frunk, and this is one of the best things about this particular bike, and it's very quirky. If you put the key here, you have that way, you basically open this. To the left, you open the gas cap, which is under the rear seat. But this particular bike has got this frunk. And this frunk lets you put a full-size helmet. Now your tools will go here along with your manual, and over here you have your battery. So that's actually a very nice thing, because you can put various adapters here to charge your phone, keep your phone out of the elements, and you have this. This is a particularly good thing for commuters because you don't have to rely on any saddlebags, top trunks, or anything. It's, as soon as you get it, it's ready to go. The other nice thing about this particular NC750 as opposed to the old version, it comes with these hooks, like this little plastic thing where you can hook a tank bag of some kind or even a book bag to the top. So that's nice and handy. Turn the key to the left, it opens the gas cap. Gas cap is right in here. Now, this is kind of like a pain that Honda does this on a lot of their bikes. So you remove this, and then you have to put it somewhere. It would be better just on a hinge. They did that with the CB500, the PCX. There's quite a few of those things. This is also like a little printable thing, so you can keep this a little bit higher up. But the gas tank on this is actually underneath the seat, so this is just the filler. This particular bike has a very nice Corbin seat. Appreciate this by Honda, having these large grab handles. Your filler for your oil is here. There's no sight glass. It would be nice if they had a sight glass, but not really a deal breaker. So you can check the oil on here. Also, doing maintenance on this is extremely easy. As you guys know, your fuel or your oil filter is right here in the front. You don't need to remove any plastic to get to it. This engine is really like the more interesting thing about this bike. It's not a typical motorcycle engine. It doesn't have the same characteristics. This is a low revving engine. And if you want to get fuel mileage that's really good, this is the type of engine that you want. It almost resembles a scooter engine. It's a twin cylinder. It doesn't make a lot of horsepower for a 750. A V-Strom, when you ride it, it's much more fun than this. But you get this for the durability and just the efficiency. Look at that. You don't even need to remove anything to get to that starter. It is like right in here. You can put my hand in there. And of course, this exhaust is extremely quiet. You don't need a loud exhaust on a bike like this. It's not meant for that. This is a stealth bike. So you have a rear rotor, 17 in the rear. You also have a 90-degree valve stem on it, so it makes it easier to fill up. Very quiet bike. It's a neutral. Guys, let's take the bike for a ride and see how she rides. For a commuter, if you're somebody that really values MPGs, as I am, you know, like I mentioned before, these bikes compare to the efficiency of a Ninja 300, which is mind-boggling because it's a 750. But that's also the reason these are extremely durable. They're low revving engines. When you have an engine that doesn't rev to the moon, it lasts a long time. You know, it's a simple recipe, really. But this is kind of like a scooter engine. The way scooters sit on... I mean, you can build a scooter out of this. And I believe that they have an ADV NC750. I don't know if it shares the same engine as this. Post in the comments below if it does, because I'm not quite sure. But I believe it's probably something similar. Honda's been doing this a lot, putting the same engine in different platforms, and I assume that this is what they're doing with this as well. This bike is kind of wearing an ADV style outfit, but it's not a adventure bike. In reality, this is really what people want in bikes, but are, I think, a little bit insecure to really admit it. You know, it's a good bike. Everything about it is like easy. You know, it's for a home mechanic, man. When you get bikes and then it comes time to work on them, they're a pain in the ass. And this one, nothing is hard on this. I mean, look, let's just say that the fork seals need to be done on this. You remove the wheel. There's one bolt there, and up here you have another bolt, and you just remove it without removing any plastic. You can get tools in there to actually slide the forks down. No need to remove any plastic. No headlights have to be removed, nothing. The battery, it's right there. 4 bolts get this thing out. You could put additional charging components in there. This bike has got these risers. It's actually kind of positions the handlebar a little bit further back. So stock, it's got a sportier forward leaning position and slightly down. And this one's got these deflectors that come with the Madstad windscreen, which is adjustable. I do wish that the previous owner got the clear one. He did give me a different, 2 different windscreens, so I'll be trying them out. But you can see like it moves up and down. I think I'm going to try this, probably get some more ventilation. Into getting one of this, I would really recommend the 700X because it's way cheaper. I mean, it's like $2,000-$3,000 cheaper. It gets about the same gas mileage. It looks about the same. And this one's a little peppier. It's got a little bit more horsepower. Honda did tune it to have a little bit more revving sort of power, but it's really the same. And here's something that I appreciate a lot about this bike. It's all about like how the user is really the focus, the ease of use, the maintenance. Putting 90-degree valves on each tire is brilliant because it doesn't cost a lot for the manufacturer. So that's a great thing that they did almost right away. The radiator, easy to pop out. The fuel or the oil filter, you can just grab it with your hands and remove it. So I'm going to do an oil change on this pretty soon. Yeah, and LED lights, I haven't tried it at night. The blinkers are pretty standard. You can modify them with newer LEDs if you like. I haven't really taken this in really long rides, but I intend to. It's the type of bike that it's not going to break the bank. It's a easy bike to live with, and that's really like one of the things I like about bikes. A lot of people get into motorcycling because of the fun and the excitement. I got into motorcycling because of the commuting and the price of gas and the maintenance. And then I think if you have the same standards as I do, you would appreciate this quite a bit. Really easy to kind of toss around, make U-turns for commuting, and easy to put on the center stand. When you sit on it, it's like a traditional setup in beg, ADV style position. And let's start her up. Very quiet bike. Yeah, but the sitting position is quite nice. Another thing that's strange about it, I'm going to put the kickstand, is there's this ridge here. And maybe it's just my legs, but the inner thigh kind of actually touches this, and it's not that comfortable. But I think they did that. Maybe you have like smaller legs and they'll kind of go down a bit. But my thighs kind of hit this part, and this is a kind of like a sharp ridge. They should have rounded this just a little bit more, because I'm constantly like, you feel it. You feel that ridge, and you really shouldn't feel it. Position is really nice though. I do like these bikes for commuting, because when you ride an ADV bike to work, they make the greatest commuters. Everything about them, you can see everything out the mirrors. You don't have to move your shoulders to like see behind you. No wonder these bikes are getting popular everywhere. The ADV style bikes for commuters are great. And this one's like narrow. It's got a narrow profile, so you can filter and lane split. It makes a lot of sense. So let's get it into first and go for a ride. The torque is available as soon as you start moving. That's why this makes a good commuter. But you know, they also make a DCT version of the NC, and I had one. I prefer the manual because it's much more fun. But if you're a commuter, you might as well get the DCT and leave it in automatic. The DCT comes with like a little clutch thing on the left. I think that's the worst idea. I just can't stand those little paddle shifters. They're so unintuitive. I did like the DCT version. It just, I already knew what the manual version was like, and I knew that it was better. I like selecting my own gears. It's more fun. It goes into like these corners just so easily, and just plenty of power to squirt on out. But 56 miles per hour in 4th gear. Now I'm going to put it in 6th gear. And you can see it kind of lugs a bit because it's like a low rever. It doesn't really struggle, but it doesn't have power. I'm like full throttle right now, and it's moving slowly, but I'm also at 3,000, just 3.2 thousand RPMs. You sit inside the bike, with the exception of your legs that kind of keep getting blown to the sides with the wind. You're sitting in the bike. It almost feels like the Super 10 when the bike is around you, but because of the narrow profile of this, I think that's the reason it pushes your legs kind of sideways. So I'm going to take it up to 70 miles an hour, 73, 75. $72 miles an hour at almost 4,000 RPMs. The ripples on the road, you feel every bump. The suspension is overly hard. When you get a bike that's a commuter, you expect it to be a little bit more pliable, a little softer. But it's the harshest ride on the commuter that I've seen. There's some ripples. Everything gets transferred to the rider. It would be nice if we had more adjustable suspension. I'm a big fan of electronic suspension. That's definitely the way to go. Never had a bike with electronic suspension. And the bike doesn't feel stressed at all. It's 4,000 RPMs. No wonder this engine lasts a long time. If you're wondering how long, I've been very curious about these bikes for a long time. I've had two of the 700s, and those bikes have been out much longer. And there's dozens of people that I have known that put 100,000 kilometers on their bikes. On the NC700 that I had, that was manual, no gear indicator, but the DCT version does have it. When you have a manual version, you're basically getting less complexity. So what are some of the cons of this particular bike? Well, one of the cons that I see is that it doesn't have a shaft drive or a belt drive. It seems like they focused a lot on providing an engine that kind of faces forward like a scooter and giving us really good fuel efficiency, a low revving engine that was shaped like an ADV bike. In Europe, they do have a street version of this that's not an ADV style. I think it's just called the NC700. This one's the NC750X. And I wish they had shaft drive, belt drive, some other form of having the final drive, but they didn't. Another thing that I would like is keyless ignition. The key here, it's easy. You know, you got these typical ignition there. The brakes are pretty good on it, even from that one rotor. Yeah, they dive in a little bit, not bad. But it would be nice, a little bit more suspension, the 19-inch front wheel. And it takes us away from the ADV thing. You know, the ADV guys, they go balls out. They think they need a 160 horsepower dirt bike, and then they just go commute on it. But in reality, 217s, you're really better off. But like I've mentioned before, you eat with your eyes. Design is all about creating passion in bikes. And bikes fail because they don't give the rider a certain je ne sais quoi of riding. You need to want to ride a certain bike. And unless you're a MPG aficionado like me, you might not gravitate towards the NC version of Honda. Unless you live in Europe, then you're like, oh my god, $8 a gallon, are you crazy? In this sort of traffic, you know, when you do bumper to bumper sort of thing, the DCT is nice. But at the same time, the clutch on this, really easy pull. This bike is so well mannered in traffic, it's just so easy to kind of like maneuver. So if you have any car getting into your lane, it's easy to kind of pull to the side. And it's also soothing to ride. You know, it's like, it's not an engine that creates a lot of heat. You really don't feel it. Making U-turns on this is easy. Wide handlebars, just make it a breeze. This is why I'm a fan of the ADV style. You know, another thing I'll say about the transmission, while riding, I've had this happen twice. From third to fourth gear, there's like a false neutral once in a while, and I never experienced that on such a new bike. And I went online, did some research, and apparently this happens a lot. And it has more to do with the engine oil that's old. That's the NC750X. It's kind of a very subtle, understated bike, and only a few people like them. And if you value MPGs and durability, this is the bike for you. Thank you for watching. Make sure you hit like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.